Are we ready? Not yet. Okay, you're muted.
Still not used to this.
Well, so I was just wondering, are we ready? Not yet.
Not yet. Nilesh is yet to. Sankarshan will be joining in about 15 minutes. He had to wrap up another meeting.
Okay. So is there going to be a moderator? Your moderator?
Since there's the two of you, we thought this time no moderator.
Okay. So, but somebody will have to conduct it, right?
Yes, I will give the questions.
What did I do?
I'm not sure.
Did I do anything?
No, I think that was Nilesh. Was it?
How do I start my PPT?
All right. So there's this green button that says share screen.
Yes.
And then in one of the windows, your PPT should pop up.
I'll have to start the PPT then.
Oh, only once you share it, then you can click the PPT format, so it can be in not slideshow mode. Yeah, we can see.
Yeah, can you see me?
Yeah, we can.
I think you have to go off the computer screen,
Or you could just click the slideshow mode. Is that
Yeah,
working?
that's what I was thinking. Because otherwise it's showing your full screen of your computer.
Oh, it's not showing the PPT?
Now it is.
No, not now. Earlier one. This is still showing your, the upper portion and all that, other than the slides. You want to click on slideshow?
Now is it showing?
It is showing the slides, but it is also showing the top portion, Okay?
Okay, now, I think, yeah, now it's working.
Yes, this is what. Right. You
got
it.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll begin then.
Okay.
Yeah,
start.
Yeah, I'll do the introduction. Nilesh, yeah.
Go off the screen then. Just slightly put it off. Otherwise, it will be awkward.
Okay, yeah. Hello, I'm Chantal Almeida de Costa. I work at the One Vote project. One Vote is an initiative to examine a diverse set of perspectives and inputs regarding the introduction and evolution of technology as part of elections. This project began in May 2021 with a focus on blockchains, but now the scope has been broadened to include election reportage, criminality, citizen rights, technology design, constitutional powers, and now disability rights. Mr. Nilesh Singit is a consultant on disability law, the state icon for Maharashtra, and for nearly 2 decades has been involved in providing solutions, formulating policies, legal counseling, and overall advocating and promoting the rights of disabled persons. Our other speaker, Mrs. Indrani Malkani, is the chairman at VCAN, an organization that seeks to promote fairness, honesty, transparency, and accountability in society by encouraging public participation. Previously, she was the convention and conferences manager at the Taj Palace Convention Hotel in Delhi. Over to Mr. Singit.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, a brief, thank you for the introduction. I'll be basically speaking about, the UN, the rights, UN Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and how it kind of helped us to kind of look at, right to vote. When and the public ensuing into a public interest litigation that was filed, and then how we kind of looked at changing the amending the 1995 Act to its present state of 2016, and the work that we've been doing. I'll start with the work that went into the filing of the litigation, and then the last part of the work I've been doing with Indrani and VCAN, and what we've done in the 2000. I think Indrani and I started working much before 2019 elections, but that was the major culmination, and all that work that we had put in kind of shown fruits. In the last 2019 Maharashtra elections. So I just begin that human rights. You have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and then all those various rights, and we the thing was that socio-economic rights and political rights. Political rights have more importance than socio-economic rights, but unfortunately, accessibility comes under socio-economic rights. In 1995 Act, it was riddled with this within economic capacity wherever accessibility was mentioned. And in 2004, when the Lok Sabha elections were just about to happen, Javed Abidi filed a public interest litigation in the Supreme Court. But unfortunately, nothing happened because the elections, they just filed, I think, a week before the elections or something. There was nothing the Supreme Court could do. What they did was, after the elections were over, they gave a set of guidelines as to what needs to be done. So the first thing, I'll just, these are the civil political rights, and this is what the Constitution says. Everybody has a right to vote, and let's not go into the disqualification of unsound mind. That actually, I'll when we come to that, I'll speak about, how people with disabilities can vote. Then the People with Representation Act and all this. Then the present 2016 Act, that which says. So basically, the barriers for participation is making is that attitudes of people. I first cast my vote in I think 1988 when I just turned 18, and I think there's some Lok Sabha election. And when I went to the polling station, they said, "Why do you even want to bother voting? Itna mehnat karke kyun aate ho? Tumhara vote se kya hoga?" So that was the basic attitude of people. You're a person with disability. What difference is going to make? Then there's the whole thing is, lack of information. Where the polling booths. I had a tough time kind of finding my polling booth. Actually every elections except the last 2-3 elections. And then the major problem was transportation. Unfortunately for me, my election booth is just bang opposite my house. Every year that's happening. But I can tell you about my friends with disabilities. Going from your house to another place is actually very difficult. And on the election day, all the public transport is closed. Taxis are closed. I mean, it's actually becomes very difficult to go. Then polling stations are not accessible. I mean, they are either on the first floor, second floor, third floor, and the stairs are very difficult to, climb. Then even if there are lifts in that building, that lift is closed on that particular day. And I mean, it's actually very difficult to convince the authorities to kind of open it. They say that if you open it, everybody will use it, and there's a lot of vandalism happening. No, we don't want to kind of risk that. And the election staff is poorly trained. I mean, we've been doing a lot of trainings last 4-5 years, and that has shown good results. But previously, I'm talking about all the elections. So and that was the major problem. So how does one tackle that? So UN Convention has given, see, the UN Convention, there are various rights. Accessibility is, as one of your top rights. I mean, it's at the height. I mean, and it uses a twin track approach. So every aspect of, right that a person with disability has, say right to employment. Right to employment is, useless without accessibility. I mean, and right to education is useless without accessibility. Same holds true with political, rights, where you go and vote. So the UNCRPD is very particular. So every section they have seen that accessibility is built into, whatever people with disabilities do. So in 2004, after every Lok Sabha election, the first election that usually happens is Maharashtra that goes to elections. I mean, in 2004, when the Supreme Court had given these various guidelines, first thing we went and did was meet the election commission here in Maharashtra. I think at that time it was Mr. Madan. I mean, if I remember correctly, we went to him when the date of election was announced, and showed him the Supreme Court order, saying that boss, these are the things that the Supreme Court has asked. What are you doing about it? And he was kind of had no clue. And we gave him some time, saying, please look into it, what all you can do. And we had gone with the entire group. I think, around 20-30 people with disabilities representing various organizations, blind people with blind, hearing impaired, people with cerebral palsy, mental retardation, you name it. At that time, 95 Act was there. So there were 7 disabilities that were listed. So all the people representing the 7 disabilities visited him. And he gave us, said, give us a week, we'll get back. And 1 week later, we saw that, he had done nothing. So the only recourse that we had was to, approach the court. So we approached the court, and some of the prayers that we gave, ramps should be provided at every booth. Provision of identification of candidates to braille should be made. At that time, there was no electronic voting machine. 2009, the electronic voting machine came into existence. Till that time, it was not there. So how do a blind person go and vote? See, one of the things that the UNCRPD says, and even our constitution says, is that everybody has a right to cast their ballot in secret. And when it comes to person with disabilities, there are some people with disabilities who need help. And most of the time, people who end up helping are people on the election officers or somebody around. Family members were not allowed, at that time. Now things have changed. So what happened, this was in Bombay High Court, and Justice Chandrachud and Dalveer Bhandari, it was 2 judge bench. And they said that unless the election does not look into the rights of people with disabilities, the court is going to postpone the election indefinitely. So the election commission has no alternative but to kind of give in to some of our demands. So one of the first things that happened was 9,000 odd polling booths in and around Bombay city and Thane districts were provided with braille balloting paper, and ramps were provided. In fact, Raju and I, Raju was my colleague at India Center for Human Rights and Law. He is blind, and he and I kind of, I think for continuously 2 weeks, we must have done at least 500-600 audits. Visited all kinds of public booths. Not public, polling booths, and see what could be done, and a rough kind of report was, provided, and most of them were made disabled friendly. But see, unfortunately, what happens is most of these polling booths that are designated are either government buildings, education institutes like schools or colleges, and things like that. So these places are actually inaccessible, and many a times they are made temporarily accessible only for the elections. So once the election is over, they remove everything. Ramp, whatever I think they do. So we need to look at the access as a very holistically, in the sense that if it is an educational institute, then I'm sure there'll be students with disabilities who would be studying there. So why not provide ramps for them already, and all the facilities that are required? So this is something that happens every election, and I think election commission also spends a lot of money on this. So as per the affidavit, priority was given to people with disabilities to stand in queues, and disabled voters to allow the facility of a companion. They could choose their own companion and to help them cast vote, and staff on duty would provide assistance to bring a wheelchair. Wheelchairs were, not all polling booths at that time had wheelchair, but now I think they have, and in fact, we even use CD. I will show the photograph which we did with VCAN, and so, again, these are the same thing. It's kind of repeating. So yeah, this is the ballot paper that happened. In fact, this is my friend Ketan Kothari, and you can see his wife Mukta. Both are blind, and what when they said that provide braille facility for a blind, everybody was kind of flummoxed. How do we do it? And the thing with Indian voting is that each constituency, it can vary from say 20 to 100 candidates, and there is no standard format of how one could do it on braille. So lot of organizations, we sat and kind of brainstormed, and finally somebody came up with the idea, said that whatever is on the voting machine, those candidate list, they could be kind of printed separately on a paper on braille. So that was kind of taken up by all the blind organizations, whoever had braille printers. By the way, braille printers are very expensive. It's not like your regular printer. They at that time they cost in lakhs. So all these organizations kind of sat together. Overnight they printed. A lot of, I think 9,000 I mentioned for thing, but at the end I think a little more than 1,000 were able to provide braille sheets. So this is one of the polling booths, and you can see that my friend is kind of looking, reading it on braille, and then kind of registering himself, and then his wife Mukta, they're kind of using that, and the corresponding numbers were kind of given. So like one on so you can, so as a kind of a side thing, that good thing that happened during this PIL was that ramps were made at the High Court. There was a previous PIL that was filed on BST buses, and there that said that there should be a ramp, but the kind of ramp that they built was kind of more like a very steep rocket launcher kind of a thing. People fell and had injuries, and one of the lawyers said that instead of helping people with disabilities, you're creating more people with disabilities with this ramp. So this kind of was again brought to notice of the judges while hearing this case, and then they kind of said that this time just there has to be a ramp and a toilet. So a friend of mine, Abhishek Ray, who is an architect, he kind of designed this ramp, and on World Human Rights Day, that is 10th of December 2004, this ramp was inaugurated by the Chief Justice. So this is one of the good things that happened. Go back. So I'll come to the next phase where we've done with VCAN. Like you said that VCAN kind of recommended my name for state icon, and I've been the state icon for quite a long time now. I think even 2000, previous to 2019 election also, I think I was the state icon. I don't know. So been there for some time, and being the icon. it actually kind of, helped a lot to kind of get a lot of things done. So one of the things that we've been doing, I mean, you've heard Smita speak, a few days back, and one of the things that is very important when it comes to election is the data. I mean, where do you get the data of how many people with disabilities are there? The census gives a very vague figure. I mean, there is no bifurcation of like, how many people with particular disabilities stay in whatever area. That is not there. So, I mean, how does one do it? So what we kind of did was, we kind of had a lot of meetings with, the election commissioner, the disability commissioner, and a lot of other organizations working with disability. And there are, disability commissioner has, a lot of data based on various organizations that are there. Any organization that works for disability has to be registered with the disability commissioner. And these organizations have a list of people with disabilities who have taken their services. So there is, the National Trust. National Trust is, another act on disability, and there's a National Trust organization also that works for people with cerebral palsy, autism, mental retardation, and multiple disability. So they also maintain their own database. So all these kind of, we tried to kind of, get all these, collect all this database and gave it to the this time the election commissioner. And we also kind of spoke to a lot of organizations. Called them up, held meetings, and asked them to kind of go and vote. See, the entire process. If people with disability need to kind of get any rights, or they have to be visible. Unless you are visible, things don't happen. It's a catch-22 situation. You are not visible because things are not accessible, and things are not accessible because you're not visible. So we have to kind of break this vicious circle. So the only way to do is, spread the word, get as many people to vote. So meetings with the state commissioner, we've used media also a lot. We used our blogs, Twitter handle, even the election commissioner used that. And whatever journalists we knew, we kind of asked them to kind of, write articles previous to election, saying that what the election commission is doing, and ask people with disabilities to come and vote and take interviews and all that. I'll be showing some photographs where we also asked some of our friends to kind of, give interviews. Good experiences they had prior elections. Every election has been riddled with some complication or the other. But last election, I think, was the best of all of them. So, yeah, this is some of the photographs, where we've met various commissioners and disability organizations. And some of the, media support that we've got to get people with disability, spread the word kind of a thing. And we also, like, I said, we did audits. So, these are some of the checklists and things that we took into. There have been, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, Indrani, we had also worked on the training module also, I think, which we gave it to the election commissioner to kind of use that to kind of train the various, polling booth officials. And in fact, we also went and trained a lot of people. I think we had gone to Panvel and, not only, the state elections and Lok Sabha elections, we also kind of been involved in municipal elections. I think the next municipal election that is going to be there, that's also kind of a lot of work cut out for us. These are some of the barrier-free entry ramps. What kind of gradient ought to be, because when you say ramp, they just do any sort of things, and actually it becomes very difficult to person with disabilities to kind of use that. So, and passages and things like that. So there is an entire checklist. And we also kind of looked at, electronic voting machines, and if they are up to the standard, and and even got a lot of blind people also to kind of look at it, and have them other blind, organizations train these blind people to kind of use that. You just can't go to a polling booth and say, no, how do I do it? It doesn't work. All those things need to be taken care of. So we've been kind of working on that. And also the election app. I mean, the government came up with the app. I mean, it's pretty decent app, but initial, versions were very unfriendly. I mean, if it catered to some disability, then, other disabilities had problems. So over the clock, I mean, there were other organizations like DRA and, other people I've been kind of, involved with them. They have been kind of doing all this checking, and, I gave my 2 bits also on that. So we've been kind of, overall looking at that. And finally, the app that came out in 2019 was pretty good. I mean, there were some glitches, but I think, they sorted out a lot of things. So, and this election, I mean, 2019 elections, we've been kind of, working, VCAN has been kind of trying to look at getting people with disabilities to come out of their house and go and vote. And for that, we need transport. So Easy Move kind of, gave their, entire fleet, in and around Bombay. And they kind of, helped us. And I mean, there was a helpline that was set up to kind of, look into all that. I mean, you had to just call them up, the helpline, saying that, I want to vote. And then, I mean, everything was organized depending on, the schedule of other voters and all that. So in this photograph, you can see my grandfather and me. My grandfather, I mean, unfortunately expired last year due to COVID. He was 100. So, I mean, like, he's, that was also the election commission took got a lot of mileage on that with, I mean, a centenary kind of voting. So it not only helped people like me, but even very senior citizens also to go and vote. And Easy Move kind of, did that. I mean, they worked round the clock and trying to see as many people with disabilities go and vote. And even VCAN helpline, played a big role in, I mean, sorting all these issues. So this is a CD. I mean, it's a, contraption where one can sit and people can pull you up. There are 2 versions available. One is mechanized and one is, manual. So I think I'm bad with names. Sorry if I goof his name up. Jamshed Dalal, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Jamshed Dalal kind of provided his CD free. I mean, quite a lot of polling booths had it. So, I mean, this was, I mean, one of the things, and it only happened in Bombay. But I mean, that was one of the things. And 2019 Lok Sabha elections was, I mean, personally for me was pretty bad, because it was on the first floor or second floor, and they had to carry me up, and it was a terrible experience. And finally, I had to kind of ask my brother to kind of chip in and help me be carried, because these guys were not able to carry me. They had no clue how to carry a person with disabilities. In fact, I almost fell down from the chair, and that was kind of a bad experience. So, I mean, as an icon, I mean, one can give your experience. So one of the things that we said that, this time I had a terrible experience. And the next, I mean, 2019 Maharashtra election, which I think happened around November or December, the election commission did a very good thing. They brought, I mean, all the polling booths on the ground floor. I think more than 5,000 polling booths kind of, they kind of got it on ground floor. So that was one thing. 2019 Lok Sabha election, otherwise also for a lot of people in Maharashtra was a bad experience. I mean, but 2019 Maharashtra elections, sorry, Lok Sabha was a bad, but Maharashtra elections was, very good. So I think this time, I mean, we were able to kind of push a lot of things. I mean, there were a lot of people in the disability sector, they wanted to kind of take drastic action, saying that 2019 Lok Sabha was bad, we need to do something, we should do this, that. We said, no, once the system is in place, I mean, if you kind of work with it very closely, a lot of things can be achieved. And that was, I mean, fortunately, it did go well for us, and it was a good experience. Yeah, thank you.
Now, Mrs. Malkani will be speaking about her experiences working with VCAN.
Good afternoon, friends. This is a subject very close to all of us. And as an organization, Nilesh has been part of our organization for quite a while, and he has touched upon most of the points. But let me just share a few thoughts and elaborate a little bit on few of the things that he has touched upon. Now, as a societal organization, VCAN likes to address issues of inclusive accessibility of all the built infrastructure, transportation, public utilities, and other objects of public use for the citizens and voters, thereby voters. And this is with particular respect to all the electoral processes. Now, when the Sugama Bharat was launched, as you would know, in 2015, September it was launched. I was privileged to be invited, and it became, because this was a flagship, campaign for persons with disabilities, and we made a pledge that we would work for the Accessible India campaign and merge it also with the Digital India campaign, because ultimately both have to come together. So that's something we worked on for over the years. Our involvement with election has been since 2002. And in the forthcoming elections of the Mumbai Municipal Corporation, which is scheduled to be held latter part of this year, will be our 15th election. And when I say 15th, I mean it includes the various local body elections, the Lok Sabha elections, and the Vidhan Sabha elections. Now, working with two autonomous bodies and also with sync, the Lok Sabha and the Vidhan Sabha elections, as perhaps most people may or may not know, is handled by the Election Commission of India. But the municipal elections or the local body elections are not held by the Election Commission of India, but by the State Election Commission, which is also an autonomous body. The connection here between the two commissions is that the electoral rolls, which are the domain of the Election Commission of India, is also used or has to be used mandatorily by the State Election Commission. Now, here comes the interesting part. All the infrastructure has to be by the state where the elections are being held, or the cities, the urban and rural areas. So, the issue of accessibility for a voter, indeed for a person with disability, or even senior citizens who then have issues of disability due to age, perhaps due to an ailment or various other things. So ultimately, as a society, we need to look at all infrastructure, at all systems with an eye towards the person with disability. Because then those who do not have a disability will not have an issue. I think that is the point where we begin with, and that's where we should head to. I must say that in so many ways, it is moving towards that. There's much to talk about elections. It's not a subject that can get done with in a short while. But let me highlight a few points which Nilesh has also spoken about. It's important to synthesize that persons with disability need to enroll as voters, and that they can and they should. Now, for that purpose, a huge amount of awareness is needed. To a great extent, VCAN has been, very much in the forefront on that issue. In fact, it was very interesting that during the Lok Sabha elections, I was approached by a magazine called White Print. I don't know if many of you know about it, but this is a lifestyle magazine which is meant only for blind people because it's printed in Braille. So it coincided with the time of the Lok Sabha election. So I took the opportunity to give an article in that paper. It was a unique experience. And when the magazine was given to me, I was at a loss because I couldn't read it myself because it was in Braille. But the fact is that there is a lifestyle magazine meant for people who are blind, one of the disabilities, because when we look at people with disabilities, we look at them apart, which we shouldn't do. What we need to do is to look at people with disabilities that they just have some special needs, and we just have to make certain provisions there. But they're no different, and they have needs, the same things that any able-bodied person needs. So you go on holidays, you go for an excursion, you have all of the other things that any able-bodied person does. And therefore, everything should be geared towards making it possible for people with disabilities to access and to be able to enjoy their time. The same goes for elections, because that's your first right as a citizen of India. Now, having said that, enrolling of the voters and then getting them to the polling stations to vote, two aspects. Getting them to enroll, there is a lot of work which has been done by the Election Commission. We have been part of such work for quite a long time. If I take the city of Mumbai, every urban, and I must here clarify that our work is primarily towards the urban sector. It's the urban field that we work in, not the rural structure or the rural side. So every urban city, megacity, township has got a particular strength. And it would be the best thing to do is to leverage that strength. Now, if I take the megacity of Mumbai, what is the unique feature of Mumbai? That is the housing society concept, or the cooperative housing society concept. So this was fully utilized by us. And I worked with the CEO of Maharashtra, that is the Chief Electoral Officer, who is always nominated by the Election Commission. So every state has a CEO. So therein we work together to bring about an amendment by way of which all societies, that is all cooperative housing societies, by virtue of them being a society, all the managing committee became voluntary booth level officers of the state of Maharashtra for elections. So therefore, when you need data, when you need to access all the members, you don't need to make different arrangements or individual arrangements. You give all, when I say you, I mean the CEO of Maharashtra gives whatever they wish to give, all the documents, or even for collecting data, you give it and use the managing committee of the housing society. The housing society is a legal entity. Therefore, if they certify certain facts or certain data, it is deemed to be authentic and legally binding. And that helps for purity of a voter roll, of the electoral roll. Similarly, when you need to make announcements, or you have certain facilities which you are giving, so your point of contact for every society, say a society may have 1,000 members, but you approach the managing committee and you have approached the entire society. This has worked very successfully in Mumbai. And there's a lot of work that has gone into it. And of course, there is always room for improvement, which we will be carrying out. And that goes for all elections. Then we come to the point of the transport, which Nilesh has already touched upon. Now, this company, Easy Move, as he mentioned, they are committed to providing vehicles which are really superb for people on a wheelchair and with any disability. And when they had first approached me, I sent them to Nilesh for him to authenticate it. How well does it serve the purpose? When he certified it, I was delighted. And I said, okay, that's it. We are going to start this off for the Lok Sabha elections, which is what was done for 2019 elections. And now, in order to give the transportation comes the other part of the logistics, which briefly Nilesh had mentioned about the, where are the disabled voters? So a major task was taken up to map all the people who are voters, eligible voters, with PWD, persons with disabilities. And that came about, it was done by the government, it was done by the social welfare organization, I mean, that organ, and we were part of it. And that exercise was done superbly, really very well done. So we have this data stored, and that will obviously keep on getting, improved upon. Because when you have to give transport, then you also have to do the routing. You have to know where the polling stations of each of these voters are. So it's not just a bus routing. There's a lot of, nitty-gritty that has to be worked out, which I did. I must here say that I am trained in logistics, and also I've been instrumental in having the state school bus policy done. So therefore, based on some of the formula that I had done earlier, we transferred that for this purpose. And it did work very well. We did have a helpline which was manned by EasyMove because it made it that much easier. The entire, let me also share that when you have elections, it's all the districts, that is the collectors, become the officers in charge. And therefore, each of the collectorate, now if you take the city of Mumbai, which has got two parts to it, that is the Mumbai city district and the Mumbai suburban district. So they got involved. And all in all, we all work together, and magic happens and success happens when we are able to join hands and work together, which is what we did. The other part that also was equally important, if not more, was the training of the staff who were going to conduct the elections. And I don't mean just the officers who were in the office site, but those who are manning the polling stations, the polling booths, and all of that. We do have a training module. It is Nilesh who's holding it. And that also training we did. Of course, it's never going to be a one-off. So therefore, it is an ongoing process, and it will be improved upon, because the more you interact with the officers, we get to know what difficulties they face and what are the things that we need to make easier for them. Then comes the coordination between various government agencies. Let us take a small example of, say, parking. When you're bringing a vehicle to a polling station where you have multiple booths. Now, when you have a person with disability or a person who's a senior citizen, but obviously is unable to walk and therefore on a wheelchair, now they need certain specific transport help at the site of disembarkation and boarding. So therefore, provision has to be made, and they may or may not use a public vehicle or say a vehicle being provided by the Election Commission's office in the various places. They may bring their own vehicle, and therefore certain provisions have to be made. Now those coordination were also done, and by and large it worked well. Of course, there's scope of improvement, which we will be addressing in the upcoming elections too. Having done that, because this is such a vast subject, it's difficult to, just to make it into a small capsule. So I won't go further into it, but I will touch upon the other aspect which Nilesh brought in, and that is about the wheelchair, which climbs stairs and brings you down. Now, it is battery operated, and also manually it can be operated. It was hugely successful. And this was given free for select, polling stations, and it by the vendor, and it was very well executed. People raved about it, those who used it. Of course, Nilesh had already typed it and had authenticated it, and thereafter it was used. I am hoping that in the forthcoming elections, we can set aside a budget by way of, we can't expect it of being a free service all the time. So the vendor needs to be compensated for, and because they also give their staff, because not everyone will be able to, get trained to use these wheelchairs. It looks very easy, but when you have a precious cargo of a person with disability seated, then you have that added responsibility of ensuring his or her safety. So that is something that we will work on, and I'm sure that it will improve. Whilst on a platform like yours of One Vote, we can't but address the issue of digital accessibility. Because as much as physical accessibility is a huge requirement, digital accessibility in today's world is without a doubt the most important factor. So because most of the things are geared towards digitally, whether you're using an app, whether you're using other means for digital purpose, all of these require a lot of training and making it more robust and more user-friendly. So to that extent, also we had been working since 2015 again to make VCAN IT accessible, and a lot of work has gone into it. It's not only, specific to elections, but for every single aspect, because, election time is when everybody gets involved. It's not that it's only the election commission, because each and every department is election time for them, because everyone has something to give. Similarly, I come from the non-profit sector, which is a NGO sector. Similarly, every NGO, no matter what their primary work is, when it comes to election, it is everybody's baby, because we are Indian citizens. Everybody has to vote, irrespective of what work you do, where you are, and which organization you're part of. So it's a question of collectively all coming together, and I'm sure that good things happen and will keep on happening. So I'm very, very happy, Chantal, for giving me this opportunity to share some of our work. And there's much to share, and I hope that in time to come, we may stay connected and perhaps do more things together. Nilesh is, of course, part of our family, and that remains. So let's join hands. Who knows? We will achieve things that we never thought we could. Thank you once again. If there are questions, I'll be happy to share my thoughts or answer to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Sankarshan has a question.
Yes, thank you, Chantal. I have a question, and I also have to express my gratitude to for our speakers in this session, as well as Smita in the previous one, primarily because together these two sessions allow us to get a glimpse into the stupendous amount of work, investment of time, and individuals who make the change, because they engage with the election commission, the stakeholders, the state, and not everything gets reflected in mainstream press, which is unfortunate. But I think if we are able to sort of get more engagement, it's very nice to be able to see momentum affect change, not just in how the voting process becomes better, but also ensuring that we stick to the idea that every vote matters. We simply cannot have voters left behind. And in that reference frame, I wanted to ask, a lot of the work that has been done so far focuses on the act of being present at a polling booth and then casting and recording your vote. The Election Commission has also expressed deep desire to address the deficit where close to around, I think, 40% of citizens are unable to vote in their constituencies because they are remote. And they also want to transition into a more digital mobile app-based systems. And there have been small experiments in this in the recent past. So I was actually going to ask in terms of how do you see the engagement increasing, or what are the kind of changes do you think need to happen to be able to ensure that now, if this transition happens, we are more inclusive, the process is more equity oriented than all the work that needed to be done to play sort of catch up from the time elections started. And I'm not specifically addressing to any of the speakers, but whoever wants to start off, please do.
Well, let me share a few points here. No doubt that systems will have to be, that's why I spoke about the digital part, that one of the exercises that we did was, the armed forces. The armed forces, they keep moving. So their names very often does not get reflected where they are, and therefore they are not able to vote always. Postal ballot is there. It's the same goes for the police, but of course, police force is in a specific area. But the armed forces, they keep moving. So that's an exercise which we did do in Mumbai for the 2019 elections. And it was initiated with the Indian Navy, because the naval base, there's a strong presence in Mumbai. So we took it upon ourselves to work with the Navy, that is with the collectors, and the entire role of all the voters of the Western region were authenticated and put on the voter list. So they were enabled to cast their vote. So a similar thing we should look to, saying that which are the sections which are left aside due to other reasons, and not just as becoming a voter. You may be a voter, but if you're not able to vote in your constituency, then there is an issue. So I think one of the things that has come about is that the different constituencies, suppose you have moved to another constituency, how easy and how quickly can you ensure that you are able to vote there? Or do you need to go back to your parent constituency, etc.? These are areas which we need to work a lot more on. So we first of all need to identify, and once all these are identified, then we need to find a sustainable solution to each one of them, which is doable. It's not that it is not doable. Electronic voting, on the other hand, like it has been talked about that if we can do an online voting, but then that's fraught with a whole lot of other challenges. And unless those are addressed, the voting is, how should I say, it is supposed to be private. It's not supposed to be known by anyone. And your identity cannot be hijacked and all sorts of things. So you can't have false voting, you can't have duplicate voting, etc. So that needs a lot of looking into. I know that there has been a clamor for online voting, but it's not as easy to ensure all these security aspects as maybe some have articulated in the past. So I think we have to look into those as well. I don't know if I have been able to answer all, but at least these were some things I thought I'd share.
Yeah, indeed. I think one of the ongoing streams of conversations we have been having in this project is the concept of agency and privacy and secrecy that current voting processes allow. And how do you maintain that in an online app-based system while also being able to resist coercion, the primary thing, and also being able to maintain the principles of the democratic process that we have at this point. So yeah, it's a challenge because the need is compelling. The implementation of a solution that meets that need is not actually as simple as the general discourse makes it out to be. Now, I'm not going to try and put SQ Masood on a spot, but he did often bring up the question of equity and inclusiveness previously in our sessions. And I wanted to check if he would have any remarks that he wants to make.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the last part.
SQ Masood, who is there on and as a participant today, he's been involved extensively in citizens' rights out in Telangana state, and he's been is a strong advocate of also examining this change proposals critically, so that the dilution of the electoral processes will not happen. And I just wanted to check. I mean, we are close to time on our meeting, so I wanted to check if he had any remarks that he wanted to share. If you are able to speak, you could go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. But I think I was trying to understand the whole issue. So right now I don't have any remark to say. So next time I will sure ask any question. Thank you.
I would like to say something on equity and inclusion. See, the various other modes of casting vote, be it postal ballot or something electronic. I think when it comes to person with disabilities, what it might happen is that they would be kind of forced with that option. I mean, maybe postal ballot or something electronic. And now what is happening is that with what we've been able to achieve, I mean, whatever little we've been able to achieve, a lot of people with disabilities are coming out of their house. I mean, for them it is like going on a picnic. I mean, once a time, I mean, they just get out their house. Many people are not able to do that. So I think I mean, it's good that all those things could be worked out. But I mean, finally it should be the option that person selects. I mean, that if that person wants to go and vote, then all the facilities should be provided. And just saying that disabled person, we have this option, do it from home or whatever. That should not be there. So that is what I feel, that sometimes these new technologies can be a bane, in the sense that you can do it very easily, and you lose out. Now, like I do a lot of shopping. I used to do quite a bit of shopping. Now everything is Amazon and Flipkart. I haven't seen a brick and mortar shop for a long time, and COVID has been responsible for that. But in other ways. So things we become very dependent on technology, and
Yeah.
that can be a little drawback. I believe in options. Thank you.
Adding to what Nilesh said, let me bluntly say it, voting is our right, but it's also primarily our duty. So we must also, each one of us, make our best effort to ensure that we do go out and vote. Because in urban areas, voter apathy is very much an issue.
True. And I think he raises a very critical point that in a different way, we had discussions in other sessions in the some of the webinars we have organized, is that there is a need for choice. It cannot be one size fits all. And if one option is digital voting that is based on app or a site on a web or a website or anything, it has to be secure and provide the same values and attributes that physical voting provides: privacy, agency, prevention of coercion. Your vote should be correctly cast. It should be recorded as cast, and you should be able to tally it into the official tally that is in the results and all of that. So I think one of the key conclusions we have been slowly driving towards is that often these new fangled approaches or technology interventions are presented as a form of convenience in the messaging. The question of voting is not about convenience. The question of voting is, are we able to continuously enable the right and ensure that every citizen who is entitled to vote gets to vote? And I think it's a key topic that whenever in newspapers and media and TV channels, like for instance, this time when the Uttar Pradesh elections were happening, I was tracking Twitter about internet voting or remote voting. At one point, there were over 1,500 tweets in an hour asking the election commission, the prime minister, the former CM, the CM of the current CM, obviously, but prior to the election, he was also the CM, to enable remote voting because we want to vote. And I think that part gets diluted and missed in all the conversations. That voting is not like doing an Amazon purchase on a web app or a mobile app, or doing a banking transaction using a mobile app. It's a far too serious business, and the tolerances for failure are far lower. I mean, if you make a bad payment through a mobile app or something, you can still roll it back through dispute handling. How are you going to handle that through when you do a voting process? And right now, even with the EVM VVPAT, it's very difficult for a normal citizen to actually handle disputes. Not to mention the fact that there is a fine associated with a wrong dispute claim being raised. So this is an extensive topic. And sorry, I don't want to fill up the airtime much, but we do feel strongly about the need for choice and the need to step away from one size fits all solutions.
Thanks, Akarshan. I think, now we have come to the end of our time. Many thanks to our speakers, and